Hey everybody, it's Wednesday morning. It's time for another Ask Chuck Dixon, where you ask me, a living, breathing comic book professional, about what he does for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books, and I have done so for decades. So let me begin to share some knowledge. Jack asks, I would like to know how you feel about Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern. What would be your take if you had a chance to write him? I always dug Green Lantern. Green Lantern's kind of he's kind of at the center of the science fiction universe. He's the cosmic character of all the DC characters. And I liked Green Lantern as a kid, mostly because I was a big fan of Gil Kane. I found his artwork to be exciting, dynamic, still do. Kind of idiosyncratic. Nobody quite drew like Kane. He had a style all his own. Well, even though it was, classic comic book stuff, I really liked it. And while I would buy copies of it and everything else, I never really got that involved with the series because I was more of a Marvel guy in that period. And I thought, I couldn't articulate this when I was a kid, but these stories were more like riddles and puzzles. They lacked emotional depth. I didn't get as involved with the characters, although I thought Green Lantern was really cool, and Hal Jordan, he's a test pilot, he's a tough guy. It's a great costume as well. I remember my sisters liked Green Lantern. Of all the superhero comics I would buy, they liked Green Lantern because they thought Hal Jordan was cute. I always thought Hal Jordan, as drawn by Gil Kane, kind of looked like Andy Williams, the singer. But that's just me. But I never really thought about writing the character. I wrote a little bit of Kyle Rayner. I did a 2-part miniseries, and I wrote some Green Lantern core stories. I had a good time doing it. And I liked Green Lantern. I appreciated Green Lantern because he was one of those Silver Age characters that Julius Schwartz brought back, made new versions of based on their Golden Age counterparts. And Green Lantern was certainly an improvement on Alan Scott, who I saw kind of I don't know, I didn't get the Golden Age Green Lantern or what he was all about. Sorry, Alan Scott fans, I just didn't understand it. You had the Flash, you had Atom, you had Hawkman, and you had Green Lantern, and they were all very science fiction based. They had science fiction-y origins, which goes along with the fact that Julius Schwartz was a big science fiction fan. Probably would have preferred to editing a science fiction magazine instead of doing comics, but he was doing comics and he was going to bring what he loved to them. And Green Lantern is the most cosmic of those 4 characters. And I dug it. I never really thought about writing Hal Jordan, but if assigned, I think I would like that. I think I could do something with that character. Tex Harmon was curious if you got asked if King Snake would be in the animated Batman Soul of the Dragon movie. You're credited as creator in credits, and they also dedicated it to Dennis O'Neil. I didn't even know about this movie until recently. I saw it on a list of Blu-rays at sale prices. They don't ask us if they can use these characters. They don't even care if we ever find out that they used them. I never even got a complimentary Blu-ray off of this, which would have been nice. Being thanked in the credits is great, but a little bit of cash and some freebies, that goes a long way too. But I'm glad King Snake showed up. He is part of the martial arts universe as created by Denny O'Neil, and obviously it's a good thing they thanked Denny. Denny is the godfather of DC Comics' Kung Fu universe, martial arts universe, and it's just, he created obviously a lot of the characters that are in the movie, Richard Dragon, Bronze Tiger, Lady Shiva. So nice that they shouted out to Denny, and I appreciate the thanks too, or the credit for creating or co-creating King Snake along with Tom Lyle. I'll have to check if I ever see the movie, make sure they credited Tom Lyle as well, because he's the first person to ever envision Sir Dorrance, the King Snake. John Harrell, I was watching an episode of Graham Nolan's Storytellers, and you mentioned a Robert McKee course. According to you, he said something about a person being thankful if they're able to stand outside of life and watch it as opposed to participate in it or along those lines. What he actually said was, I'm going to interrupt your question here, was that if that's the way you are, I mean, don't be thankful that you're more of an observer than a participant, but if that's the way you are, that's what made you a writer. And you should be thankful for that. You know, if it brought you to this place where you are a writer and a creator and an artiste, you have that sort of outsider vibe to thank for that. Anyway, back to John's letter or question or query. I felt like I want to write something for a while, but I don't have experience writing a story and feel like I have no idea where to start or how to do it. I also feel a little overwhelmed in where I might start. Another thing I've ran into is I don't know what story I would tell. Would you have any suggestions on what steps a person who finds themselves stepping outside of life to watch it feels like they have a story to tell might take it from there? I mean, when I started writing, I mean, I knew I wanted to be a writer before I actually knew how I wanted to make that happen, or before I really had any ideas. I mean, I knew when I was a kid I wanted to be a writer. But what's a kid going to write about? They don't have a whole lot of life experience. They don't even half the time understand anything that's going on around them in the world of grown-ups. So what was I going to write about? And even into my adulthood, I knew I wanted to be a storyteller and a writer. And I found it was far more comfortable writing if someone handed me, like, we want you to write this. This is the story we want you to write. And so I sort of learned how to write by being assigned things. But when I got into comics, I had no clear path of what kind of stories I wanted to write or what I wanted to write about. So I just sort of felt my way along, finding my way, learning as I went. Because, you can go to school for writing, but 99% of what you learn about writing is self-taught, from reading criticism, from stumbling and falling and getting back up. And as to, where to start writing your story, just start writing it. It's hackneyed advice, and you hear it from writers all the time, and I used to hate it when I was a new writer. Write every day, and just start writing. Just write. But you got to do it. It's a muscle you've got to work. And the more you write, the better you're going to get at it. And remember, every word you write down isn't permanent. It's not carved in stone. Every phrase you come up with isn't a gem. Those things come out of polishing and rewriting. You don't write, you rewrite. So start writing your story. If you have a story, if you have a scene, maybe you don't have a whole story. Maybe you have this cool scene in mind, and just write it. See how you feel. See if you like doing that. And out of that scene might grow a story. Or maybe just a character. Write about a character. Exchange a dialogue. Whatever. So just start somewhere and write. You may throw the whole thing out and start over again. Or you may use part of it. You may polish it into, a work of genius. Who knows? But you got to start somewhere. And I'm suggesting you start anywhere. Start at the end of the story. Maybe you don't know where your story starts. So just start writing something and you'll figure it out. You might write your opening scene and it's a perfect opening scene. Or you might decide that, hey, this needs more lead in. The characters need more introduction. But basically, at the beginning of any story, you've got to set up your premise and you've got to set up your characters and you've got to put them in motion. And do this all in a way that doesn't seem like you're just telling a story. It's like you're sharing an imagined experience. So I don't know if any of that was helpful. I hope it was. That's about as airy-fairy as I get about writing. And but just do it and see if you like it, and complete whatever you write. If you're going to write a novel, finish it. If you're going to write a short story, finish it. It's hard in the middle. That middle part where you're bored with your own story. You have to get yourself re-excited about it. Just remember, it's all new to the reader. Even if you're tired of it, you already know, the solution to your story. You already know the end, but the reader doesn't. It's your job to lead them there in an interesting way. So yeah, just start writing and see where it takes you. Jeff says, it made me wonder if the points you made about Captain America and Superman would also apply to Doc Savage, particularly the part about a character's arc already being finished and not changing the character. Of every fictional character I can think of, Doc Savage is one whose arc was over before you started reading about him. He's just the most fabulous, smartest, toughest, strongest, bravest guy who ever lived. And that's what we like about him. He's a big bronze badass. And the writer's main challenge in writing these stories was to come up with interesting locales and new situations for Doc to find himself in, new menaces to conquer, new bad guys to kick in the butt. And that was the secret of the success. Robeson never changed the formula of the stories. They're very formalized, but I'm not going to criticize because they were extraordinarily successful. Millions of people around the world love Doc Savage. Successful in the pulp, successful in paperbacks. I mean, it's just a huge success story all the way around. But yeah, Doc has no arc. He's not going to change. He's not going to doubt himself. He's not going to have moments of anguish or angst. He's never going to get married. He's never going to have children. It's just strongly plotted stories with a badass character that we're rooting for, and he makes it through to the end, and that's what we want. It's fictional escapist comfort food, and there's nothing wrong with that. And in the hands of a skilled writer, it's good stuff. Tarzan's another character. I mean, once he meets Jane, and basically wins her heart, his arc's over. Tarzan doesn't change. He doesn't, you're not going to deconstruct Tarzan, or if you do deconstruct Tarzan, I don't want to know you. You just want to leave iconic characters like this alone. Nancy Drew, her arc is over the minute she decides that she wants to find out, who the man in the mustard yellow hat is and who took the gems from Mrs. Faversham's nightstand. So once Nancy Drew is on the case, the arc's over for the rest of her existence. And we want, plucky Nancy not listening to anybody and going ahead and getting involved in dangerous situations. That's what we want. We want to see that, and we don't want her suffering any major setbacks or anything like that to her career as a juvenile sleuth. I mean, this is what it's about. Conan, born on a battlefield, suffered all these losses as a child, sets him on his way, and that's his arc begins the first time. His arc ends the first time he picks up a sword and kills somebody, and then he's goes on to be the lovable, lustful, murderous, barbarous, roughhousing guy that he is. That's what we love about him. We don't want. Who wants Conan to change? Who wants Conan to be different? Who wants to deconstruct Conan? Please don't do that. And a lot of these characters we love, that's the one thing they have in common. They're set on a path and they don't change. Yogi Bear is Yogi Bear. We don't want Yogi Bear to learn anything. We don't want him to improve or to fail or whatever. We just want to see Yogi Bear stealing picnic baskets and outwitting the ranger and, being his, gregarious self. You could probably get stories out of deconstructing this character, but why would you bother? And once upon a time, this was the standard in escapist fiction. You introduced a hero, he was stalwart, he was brave. You introduced a villain, he was horrible and nasty and cowardly and vicious, and your story went from there. And the writer's job is to come up with a story that, to what happens to this character and how he triumphs in the end, how he faces down adversity. But, the character, be it a man or a woman, they're not going to change. These events aren't going to alter them or change them or weaken them. We're not going to learn a lot about these characters. They're sort of set in motion. We're familiar with them. They're fictional, heroic icons. And we just want to see them in an engaging, interesting story that has a lot of action, maybe a few laughs and some surprises and all the rest. But so much of what's written now and what we see in TV and movies is the characters being self-examined or being torn down or, discovering new things about themselves that we didn't know or they didn't know. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But not all the time. Sometimes I just want to see, a good guy, fighting the bad guy and do it in an interesting way. And there's countless ways to do that. You just have to think of them and stay engaged. Michael Boberg. Some of the unpublished material from CrossGen's Negation War can be found online. Tony Bedard has figured out which characters would have survived had the company continued. If you had been given the reins and opportunity to choose, which characters would you have kept? Which titles would have continued into the post-Negation War CrossGen universe? Were there any titles that you would have liked to have written that you didn't get a shot at? Also, does it bother you to talk about CrossGen? Honestly, it still breaks my heart nearly 20 years later. I was just reading the books. In terms of consistent quality of both artwork and storytelling, there's never been a run by any company to rival what you and your co-creators did. These are very kind words. Very kind words. Thank you so much. And yeah, I don't mind talking about CrossGen. I still miss my office. I still miss seeing everybody. I mean, the idea of having a facility where all of the creators are together, this small army of comic book creators working shoulder to shoulder every day in the same facility. I mean, making trouble. It was really cool. It was really unique, and I appreciated every moment. And I look forward every day to getting to work and seeing everybody and getting to work with everybody. So it was a really unique experience. Now, as far as Tony Bedard goes, Tony, like me, understood what the opportunity we were being offered. We were being, without editors. Nobody was telling us what to write, except we had to stay to, the formats and the genre and everything of what we were writing. And we had to adhere to the Uber story of CrossGen, which was the main thing I objected to, but I think Tony leaned into it. I think he liked it. But both he and I appreciated this opportunity and really dug in. We really worked hard. I would see Tony in his office pounding away on the keyboard, beads of sweat on his forehead. Just the guy was just into it and doing some great work. Tony's a terrific writer, and he was really let free. He let his mojo fly at CrossGen, and it was a joy to see. It really was. And Negation and Negation War and all the things he worked on, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and Route 666. This was all fun stuff, and he was just having a time of his life, and I think imparting that enthusiasm to the readers as well. And now, if I had my druthers, Negation War, which was our big event, it would have ended the Sigilverse. The Sigilverse was the Uber story, the overarching storyline across all of the CrossGen titles. And the problem with the Sigilverse was it was killing our sales, because we had all these titles that were all tied, and the readers were very much aware that all these titles were tied to a single story, and that we were going somewhere, and there were going to be all these reveals. But you almost had to buy every book in order to keep up with everything. And, who buys every book in a line? Everybody didn't like every book. The book The First was a loss leader almost from the beginning, but Mark Alessi insisted we keep publishing because it was important. It was a key element to the Sigilverse. But nobody liked it. The readers hated it, or not many. It had a readership, but it was very small and shrinking. So the proof in the pudding was when I did El Cazador, it was not tied to the Sigilverse. It actually took place on Earth, in real places, and there weren't any supernatural or science fiction elements to it. Consequently, it was our biggest selling title. It was big for us, and I think because it wasn't tied to the Sigilverse, people knew they could read it independent of the rest of the line. And that's really what the readers were asking us to become, was a genre publisher. We did genres good. We did a good espionage book. We did a good horror book. We did great cosmic sci-fi. We did great fantasy. We really great detective stories. When you gave CrossGen a genre, we went at it earnestly to create the best escapist entertainment inside of that genre that we could. Now, as to what I would have kept Sigil, even though Sigil is obviously at the center of the Sigilverse. It was a good, solid space opera with a lot of really engaging characters, and I would have kept that around. I would have also kept Sojourn. It was such a good-looking book. Fantasy was big at the time. Lord of the Rings was out. I would have kept Sojourn around. I think it was a successful title. I just would have made it so the story was going somewhere. The story really wasn't going anywhere. Scion's another book which was just so pretty, especially if Jimmy Chung would have stayed. We certainly would have kept it. It's kind of a genre mashup of science fiction and fantasy, but I liked it. I never quite understood the book, but it was so pretty. You couldn't not like it. Brath was a book that I wrote that I probably would have ended, simply because there's only so far you can go with this material in my mind, and I would have ended it with issue 36, so we would have had basically a trilogy. We would have had, 3 big fat trade paperbacks to sell that told a whole complete story. I always felt like Brath was an epic, a saga, and epics and sagas have an end. And I liked writing it. I thought it was good stuff. It was strong stuff, but I would have ended it. Way of the Rat, I would have kept going. Maybe not as a monthly, but maybe as a series of specials or one shots or whatever. This universe that Jeff Johnson created the visuals for, and I collaborated with him on it. It was so deep and so beautiful, and there was so much more to explore that I would want to keep Way of the Rat around. It was also pretty popular amongst all our books, and of course El Cazador, because it was a bestseller for us. I would have kept going with it as long as, I had a lot of stories I wanted to tell beyond the first 6 issues, and I would have kept going with it as long as the readers were into the pirate books. Ruse is another one. Ruse was one of the more beloved titles that we had at CrossGen, had a really loyal fan base, but when I ended the Sigilverse, I would put Ruse in actual Victoria, England, instead of Arcadia or whatever made-up place it took place in. In fact, I would do that with all of the CrossGen titles. I would move them into our reality. Way of the Rat would take place in China. Brath would take place in the actual ancient Roman Empire. Move us away from this, made-up stuff, parallel universe stuff, because I think it got in the way of the believability, the reality-based kind of entertainment that our readers really wanted. I also would have published American Power. American Power is the most successful book we ever canceled. Canceled it before we even published it. We got a lot of pushback from the left on this book because it was our first superhero book, and it was going to be superheroes fighting American superheroes fighting in the war on terror. Basically going right up against radical Islamics. And the funny thing is, though it was leftists and for the most part who objected to this book, Chris Orr was our head of marketing, and he was very much a liberal. And he was the one that suggested a book like this. He even suggested the title, American Power, because at the time there was a lot of discussion of America projecting its power overseas. And he said, well, let's make that a comic book. Let's make that a superhero. Just like Captain America went against the Nazis, we're going to create a line of superheroes. And so I created this ensemble of superheroes. They're like quasi-science based. They're like Captain America. It's from a government program, and we set them loose. And it was a lot of espionage stuff and war action, and all the rest was all grounded in some sort of reality. It had nothing to do with the Sigilverse. And I say it's our most successful book we ever canceled because we were going to have American Power #1 was going to be presented on Free Comic Book Day. The first issue of American Power was going to be free, all new material. And I don't know if you know about Free Comic Book Day, the mechanics behind it, but the retailers actually pay for the books. They're not given out by the publishers for free. And at the time, the retailers were paying 19 cents per issue for a free comic book. And the publishers, for the most part, either broke even or lost money, but it was all for promotion. And it's good promotion. Free Comic Book Day is a pretty powerful promotional tool for the comic book industry, and all the publishers participated in it. But the thing about American Power was the orders from retailers for the American Power Free Comic Book Day were so large at 19 cents a copy that we were actually going to make a lot of money off of it. We were going to make money. We were going to see a big profit from the Free Comic Book Day. That's how anticipated this book was. CrossGen's first move into superheroes. CrossGen's first controversial title. Things like that really ginned up a lot of interest. Now, Mark Alessi, in the end, caved to the pressure. And we had a writer quit. We had a writer swear he'd never work for us again over this book. But Mark caved, unusual for Mark to cave, because I don't think he disagreed with the politics of it at all. In fact, I know he didn't. And but he thought it would hurt us in the end. And both Chris Orr and I argued, well, why are you, capitulating to like three guys that have a website when literally over 500,000 readers have said they want this? It would have been the biggest selling title in comics when it debuted. And the official number one, beyond the Free Comic Book Day number one, it would have been an enormous moneymaker for us. It just shows, go woke, get broke. So just sad. But I would have brought back American Power and made us some money. Aiden Belcher, I was wondering, why do you think this extreme version of the Joker is so popular to use, and what do you think is the best way to portray a character like Joker? How do you balance the psychopath and the clown aspects of the character? Joker is, he's obviously an iconic character, and I preferred him, in his classic form as a trickster, a foil for Batman, but not necessarily his arch enemy. Back when I started reading about the Joker, he was obviously mentally deranged, but he could get a gang of criminals together because he came up with very clever ideas for heists and robberies and crimes. And when I started reading about the Joker, he didn't want Batman around. He would make moves in order that Batman didn't show up. His day was ruined when The Dark Knight arrived. And that kind of got flipped on its head in later years, which I'll talk about more in just a minute. But and this was kind of solidified by the portrayal on television, the 1966 television series of Batman. The writers of that show kind of had to figure out the characters more. They had to give them a little bit more depth than the comics had. The comic books at the time, it was enough that the Joker was zany and crazy and lots of nutty visuals and all the rest of it. But for the television show, they made the move to have him actually be funny. Before that, Joker wasn't particularly funny. His jokes were, he was the only one who laughed at his jokes. Nobody else did. But Cesar Romero's portrayal combined with the material they wrote for him, it was a funny character. So he was kind of charming. He was still, deranged and goofy and vain and cowardly. But now his jokes actually made you laugh. And then sometimes you laughed at him when he wasn't trying to be funny because it was, dismayed reaction at the arrival of Batman. But still, in the TV version, he wanted to avoid Batman, not draw him to him. The way the Riddler seemed to be more involved. The Riddler seemed to want to draw Batman toward him. Joker wanted to be left in peace, but Batman just would never leave him alone. And we get to the animated series version, and they kind of take that even further. The animated Joker, he's very funny. Not only Mark Hamill's performance, but the material they write for him. He's a laugh-out-loud funny guy. A little bit more perverse, obviously a little bit more psychotic than his previous portrayals. But he's still true to the comic version and the 66 television version in that he's vain, he's cowardly, he's mercurial. But the most important thing the animated series brought was that he's unpredictable. And at the time, there was a lot of cross-pollination between the animated guys and all of us working on the comics. And it was great because there was, I hate the word synergy, but there was a synergy. Denny had hired these younger guys to assist him. So we had these three younger guys. And then the animated series is coming around. And we have Paul Dini and Bruce Timm visiting the DC offices all the time. And there's a lot of exchanges going on about what these characters are about and what they're like. A lot of serious discussions about this stuff. And what we all took away from it, I think organically, almost all at the same time, was that Joker was really, really unpredictable. You didn't know what he was going to do. Even he didn't know what he was going to do from moment to moment, and that was what made him scary. And he didn't have to butcher a school bus full of children to make him scary. He was scary because people that are unpredictable are chaotic 24 hours a day, or they're dangerous. And Scott Peterson summed it up best when he said that the Joker wakes up every morning. He reinvents himself every morning. And that was something I latched onto, and a lot of other writers latched onto, was the idea that, this guy wakes up, he's got a whole different plan today. He's got different goals, things he wants to accomplish. He might even hate what he did yesterday. He might even hate himself, his yesterday version of himself, because he's a new man. And out of this grew the idea that when he talked about his past or talked about himself, he reinvented everything. These are all new inventions each time he told these stories. So there's many different versions of Joker's origin as there are instances in which he told his origin. So you never know what's true with Joker, which makes him kind of a disturbing character as well. But, we move into the realm of the movies, and they take a different route. They, basically launch off of what, Alan Moore and Frank Miller have done, and they go very, very dark. And the Joker is no longer funny. Even Jack Nicholson's Joker isn't funny. He's just menacing and nasty. And then Heath Ledger and Joaquin Phoenix and all the other people that have played the Joker since, he's kind of he's Hannibal Lecter in clown makeup. And, more and more bloody all the time, more and more nasty all the time, and go darker and darker and darker and darker. I don't know how popular this Joker is. I think he's more popular with writers than readers, because some writers really are drawn toward, I'm going to make the nastiest Joker story ever. I always wanted to make a Joker story that was clever or interesting. And, but, a lot of people like to get into just the bloodletting and the nastiness and the psychotic, almost horror angles of the Joker, and I don't like that. The other aspect of the Joker I don't like, that was, I think, introduced in Killing Joke, was the fact that the Joker is the flip side of Batman. There's a duality here, and Joker is chaos and Batman is order, and they're drawn together. They have this psychic connection, this astral connection. I don't like it. I don't buy it. Joker's, he's a crazy villain, but he's got a lot of competition on the Batman side. Of the Batman's rogues gallery. There's a lot of nut jobs over there. And he may be the signature one, but he's not the only one. And I don't like the idea that these two are somehow linked together at the soul, that there's some sort of destiny shared by the pair of them. Now, Joker may think this, and I don't even like that concept. But, that their two fates are tied together, it doesn't go anywhere. Where does that go? It's kind of like that's the end of the story. And I'm not a big fan of it. Now, I've written a lot of Joker over the years, and I like writing the Joker, even though I don't like the Joker. I don't like him as a character. I only like writing the Joker because I get a chance to have Batman kick his ass physically or run rings around him mentally. Because the Joker thinks he's so damn clever, and he thinks he's superior to Batman, that his side is going to win ultimately, and Batman always thwarts him, and that's the best part of a Joker story, because in a good guy versus bad guy story, you want a compelling, nasty, seemingly insurmountable bad guy to set your hero up against, and then you get that cathartic thing when that villain is put down. So I loved writing Joker stories. I mean, I literally had Nightwing beat Joker to death in a story, and I loved every second of writing that, because I don't like the character. You're not supposed to like him. I think that's the problem. And when people say, "Oh, I love the Joker," it's like, well, maybe you need to seek some help. I mean, why? Why do you like the Joker? There's nothing charming about him. There's nothing there to like. He's chaos. He's anarchy. And chaos and anarchy are scary. You should be rooting for Batman, not the Joker. Although I see why people like Joker stories. A good Joker story is a good story. He's a formidable foe. But I don't like him. I'd kill him again if I had a chance. Bobby Sharps. I'm a CPA who's been an aspiring writer since my college days. It's the sci-fi story I've always wanted and never seen or read. Basically, it's the end result of all the frustrations I felt while consuming the work of others. I can dig that. I basically really wanted to get into comics because I thought comics were going in a bad direction writing-wise, and I thought I could do something about it in my ignorance and confidence and my own swelled vision of what I could do. But I knew comics could be better than what they were. My question to you is about the format. What format, comic or novel, has the best chance of actually having someone else read it and enjoy it, considering the modern audience and your knowledge of the market? Your opinion carries a lot of weight for me. If I had a few $100,000 to spend on it, I'd make a movie, as that's the best way to get attention, obviously. In lieu of that, what's the best way to find an audience? I don't want to break anybody's heart, but it's not comics. Most people don't read comics. Most people aren't even aware comics are still around, if they ever knew about them. And there's a whole lot of people out there who don't like comics. They actively don't like them. They think they're silly or childish or stupid. Yeah, I know. It's my medium. I love it. But I can't expect everybody to appreciate it. You know, it's like people that think that jazz sounds like noise. Well, some jazz sounds like noise to me. It doesn't sound like music. It's all a matter of taste. It's all a matter of what you want. But comics have such a small, mostly because we've skipped a generation of readers. We didn't bring any young readers in for nearly 20 years. The pool of people who appreciate comics and like comics as a medium is smaller than it's ever been before. So you don't want to go after that audience because there aren't enough of them. But lots of people read books. Lots of people read sci-fi books. And so if you're going to write your story, I urge you to write it as prose. You can always do a graphic novel adaptation of it later, if you want to throw some money away. But I would write it as a novel. And hey, play the lottery. Maybe you'll win enough to make a movie. But yeah, I would not start doing a comic book. If you seriously want to reach an audience and build a bigger audience. Hey, if you have questions, comments, criticisms, if you say, hey, Chuck, you're full of crap, and here's why, contact me at brunobookstore@gmail.com, brunobookstore@gmail.com. And hey, why don't you head over to ArcTunes when you get a chance and check out My Sister Suprema. It's a superhero parody. It's a sibling rivalry comedy that I'm writing, and Anthony Gonzalez Clark is gorgeously illustrating. And I think we're up to about 8 or 9 episodes now at this point, probably even more, because I'm recording this a few weeks before you see it. But go over. It's at ArcTunes at archaven.com. It's free. It's high res. It's got tons and tons of comic book material. We're putting out more comic book material each month on ArcTunes, just by volume, than either DC or Marvel are currently. And there's definitely something there that you're going to like and want to follow every week. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the likes. Thanks for the support. Thanks for subscribing. And I'll see every single one of you next Wednesday as we move on down the road.